right, I think I'm live. If you guys can see me, just let me know in the chat. And hopefully my internet is not too slow today. Just give me some feedback if you hear me well, if you see me well, if everything is fine. Let me know in the chat. And for the rest, I'm going to start. Welcome to this monthly Q&A session for the Academy. I received a few pieces from you guys, and I'm really excited to start working on it. So yeah, I'm gonna start sharing my screen and show you what I have for you today. All right, I'll hide this and go with our first, which was going to be the work of Brad. Brad, thank you for sharing your work with me. I'll have some feedback for you today. I'm going to just quickly go here to make sure that I don't miss what you're asking for. So you had a hard time with expression or expressing feelings and emotion on your paintings. You wish you could have more feelings in them, make them less boring, more interest. All right, so Brad, I actually started to work on this painting just before I started the live workshop. Because there's a few things you can do, and it's going to be hard for me to just express all of them really quickly in this session. But I want to give you the direction in which you should start thinking and working on, because I think that's what you need. So first of all, you did great pieces. I really like. I have this one and this one. What I like, you have an established style already that I can see. Even with just two pieces, I can see that you have like that kind of style with like the lines that are colored and very vivid colors as well. And yeah, they're well rounded and rendered. So good job, really. The feedback I want to give you is how to add more emotions. And for this, there's a few things. First of all, I took like this picture online just to give you a sense. Practicing expression like that is definitely going to be something for portraiture that's going to help you. Just doing those kind of studies, just go on Pinterest, do facial expressions, and you're going to find a bunch of them. Because that's the first thing I did when I look at this. I was like, all right, so how can I push the limit of this expression? And so I did a little work here, and I'm going to show you like in steps what I did. So the first thing I did is just push a little bit the movement and the expression. I thought that because she was very still, it doesn't make it boring, doesn't make it more interesting though. And there's a place for everything. So I didn't know what kind of expression or feeling you wanted to go through. So I just go with my gut feeling, right? So I pushed her a little bit on the side and then put movement in the hair. Hair is always a great way to add some movement, and it's going to add a lot of interest in a portrait. And the other thing I did is obviously I moved the eyes a little bit, just giving her like a little bit more of a squint in the eyes. And I could have moved a lot of things, but at this point, I didn't know what kind of expression you wanted to go with. So yeah, it's just my own opinion on this one. So that's the first thing I did. I tried to add some movement, a little bit more of expression, obviously. Those are obvious things. The less obvious things is your lighting. Your lighting in general is very soft, and there's no problem with that, but you wanted to add more emotion, and emotion comes with very strong light. You can imagine that a scene that we express love versus a scene of a horror movie will have very different emotions in terms of lighting. So what I tried to do is to add more emotion by adding some directional light. So I decided to have this direction of the light. So imagine that light comes from there, and having just an arrow like that to give you like a repair on where to start is going to be really good. This way you know where to start. And so that's the first thing I did. Then what I did is you had like a gradient, right, from bottom to top, very horizontal line, right, split in the middle like this. And so what I did is I gave it an angle, and I started with the dark side on the left and the pale side on the right. And the reason why is because the light direction goes in this direction now, and this is going to give me more contrast because the light is going to hit here, and the background here is going to give them contrast. If you're not, at ease with lighting, there is a class that I'm going to actually do very soon called Illustration from Imagination. It's a program. It's not part of the academy. It's something else where I work intensively with everybody that takes the course for 6 weeks, and we go much deeper into light. So if you're interesting, just stay tuned. You'll have an email as part of the academy to remind you when it starts. So that's the first thing I did. I just made sure that to have a little bit more movement, and see now the movement of the light also follows the hair. What I did after that is give the character more of a directional shadow. So making sure that you have sharp edges on your shadows is going to give a lot of emotion, a lot of rhythm, a lot of things to look at on your illustration. If you look at your basic portrait, you have some shadows, which are great. It's well rendered. We see there's rendering. We see the form. What I did is to make sure that we understand where is the direction of the light. And for that, I was just simply rounding things like here, giving volume to the hair by giving a little shadow here, having that cast shadow from the hair on top of the forehead. By the way, I want to say hi to Felix. I just said hello in the chat. I just saw that. And then you have basically all those highlights at the right places. And I see you too, actually, Brad, right? So anyway, hi to everybody. Hi. So that's what I did. And I think that's where you're at with this illustration, right? It just did that you need to do. Just push the lighting a little bit more, have more direction to it, and it's going to give that much more interest. And that's a great portrait. It's beautiful. This one has just a little bit more action, a little bit more interest. And I think that's what you were asking for. So here you got the example. I also wanted to give you an example. I'm going to put all that together. An example with this one. This one is the same problem that you have. It's very well colored. It's beautiful illustration. There's a few things I can point out right away, such as the hand. The hand is a bit too close of your edge here. So just make sure that it's called a tangent line, that thing. When things are really close together like this, it kind of attracts the eye in the wrong way. So just be careful to that. And the reason why I think like this is missing something is the light direction here. And so I went online and I tried to find this picture, which I'm assuming was your reference or your inspiration. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a new document so I can have them side by side. And I'll show you how you can modify this quickly. Okay, cool. So yeah, all right. So sorry, I was reading the chat at the same time. I'm not able to do two things at the same time, really. Sorry, let's back to this. So I think that's what's needed here. Like you have something great, but it's missing the direction of the light that's going to give just that much more emphasis. So how you do this? Well, first of all, you just have to have a little bit more, observation towards the original picture. And first of all, you should think about, all right, where is the light source here? And so the light source is something on top of it with a little bit of an angle, I would say. So, something like that, I would say. That's about the light direction for what I see. And so that's what you want to push here. So that's what you want to push here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to put it to multiply. Multiply is always great for shadow, especially when you already have some values. Try to not go dark with like black or, in this case, it's dark yellow. I'm going to try to pick maybe a pink-ish, and then maybe put it a little bit more to the reds and see what that does. Yeah, that should be fine. And then what you want to do is make very straight line at the beginning. Doing straight line when you do your shadows is just going to make sure that you take decisions, and then you can soft them later on. That's a bit too dark though. And then what you want to do is make sure that, so you push, so there's like a shadow in the ear here that it's very prominent. There's the shadow of the glasses, but you kind of did it. But let go like even like lower than that and come here, sort of. push that. Now there's a bounce light from another spotlight, but I'm not gonna think about it, or maybe not. It's still the top one. I'm still trying to understand the light direction. There's probably more than one light on him, but I'm gonna go just with one light direction. So I'm gonna assume that it kind of comes like here and kind of just does the jaw here. You have a very straight angle here. Like you already had it here, like you had like kind of angle, but putting it more straight and more sharp, more crisp, it's going to help us understand where is that light coming from. So something like that. And then one under the nose, that gives us a good direction as well. It's definitely like darker inside the glasses. I would just darken everything here. Definitely that corner too. And then he has like very thin hair, but you did like very thick. So what you can do is just push the shadows that would go under it to give them even more like volume and structure. I'm going to push that just a little bit more. Having a little shadow here. And already that, maybe just a bit more here. Already that gives a little bit more of a direction of the light. It's a lot more dramatic now. And so that was just a quick example I want to give you. That's basically what I did with this portrait. I just made sure that adding a little bit more light direction. And then what you want to do, like here, like I put it very, very like sharp and crisp. But then you can go and you can soften it up a little bit, making sure that it's not so crisp everywhere, right? But that we still keep some crisp edges to give that effect that we have direct light. So that was it. Beautiful, beautiful portrait. I hope what I give you help you, and I'm looking forward to see them pushed in the community this week. So thanks for sharing, Brad. Next, we have the work of, am I jumping step here? I'm jumping step. No, perfect. Felipe. All right, Felipe, thanks for sharing. Felipe, what are you saying? You're saying that you're working for the foundation. Yes, you're asking me if asking me if you need to practice fundamentals with traditional tool instead of digital tool. When it comes to fundamentals, there's different fundamentals that to me are easier to work with traditional media, and for me that are easier for others to work in digital. I'll tell you which ones are which. So when it comes to doing sketching with a tablet is not easy. The tablet at the beginning is hard to actually control. You make mistakes, and it's hard to have control over your hand and wrist, basically. And I'm making just a quick sketch while I'm talking. And so starting, if you start from the very base, doing it on paper and on tablet will help you both make sure that you understand how to use the tablet, because you absolutely need to do that. And it's going to give you also just enough practice to be able to have more confidence when it comes to your sketching. Although when it comes to digital, you'll have many layers, which is the technique that I like to use, having many layers and just build my sketch very loosely, and then putting the layers opacity down. And then on top of that, doing in details. I'm sure you already saw this technique in the academy. If not, it's coming. There's a video on it. So that's a technique that I love to do. And you cannot do that. Well, you can. There's definitely papers where you can see the transparency and then do exactly that technique. But it's much easier with a computer. So when it comes to traditional digital for sketching, that's my thought. For everything else, when it comes to rendering, when it comes to blending, when it comes to coloring, when it comes to lighting, I feel like once you know how to play with the tool, with the medium, which is digital painting, it's much faster and much easier to learn, because you got all those tools to help you basically understand. You have adjustment layers to help you understand. You have Control Z if you make a mistake. You have an eraser that actually erases even like the thickest of the paint. If you were to do an acrylic, for example, you would not be able to do this. So for everything else, I feel, to my own personal experience and my own opinion, that digital painting is much stronger. So that's what I have to say about that. So if you want to do sketching and then scan them and then use those sketching into Photoshop, that's definitely a good technique. But for everything else, I would go straight into digital. It's the future of the industry. I don't think any concept artist to this day can only be traditional. They all need to do digital. I feel like traditional is becoming more like something that you do if you love it. But for professionals that work in the industry, it is much faster and much more efficient to do digital paintings. All right, that being said, let me help you with this one. So you did a great job. It is a little bit muddy and a little bit messy. I think what you need to do is keep in mind that there's hard shapes, and I know it hasn't been covered in this exercise. It's going to be covered in the future. I actually have a few tutorials coming about this. Just make sure that you have some sharp lines, some sharp edges at some places. Right now it's very patchy. You can see that. You know what? I'm going to make a contour, so you're going to see what I'm talking about. Like here, it's very patchy. I have like one patch there, one patch there. Oops, one patch there, one patch there. And it's a bit random, and it kind of breaks down the anatomy of your character. So what you want to do instead is make sure that you have a little bit of a knowledge of the heads of the plants. There's actually a really cool class called 1 Week Portrait. Maybe you already saw it, maybe you already participated to it. But I'm making the 1 Week Portrait a version 2, which is going to be out in a few weeks, I think. And we'll talk about actually that, the plane of the head. But what you want to do is make sure that you have crisper edge, like here, for example, and here, that you're actually keeping. Because there's an actual line here, you know, like for the jaw on both sides. And we kind of need to have like some sort of a feel for it. And then using the smudge tool, for example, you can smudge the edges a little bit. I love to do this as a technique for me to just I paint a hard edge line like this one, for example. It's easier to just place, like if I'm trying to match the other one here, it's easier to just place it and then use the smudge tool to just basically smudge that area. And then from time to time using the mixer brush tool to just move pixels that could be moved, like in this case. Like you can see that more I move pixels, I'm just going to try to match those values here. More I move pixels, and more it changes also the way, the anatomy of the face, right? So right now, each pixels in here, I'm just going to paint with I'm painting with a smudge tool everywhere just to make sure that those patches are not so patchy. Just smoothing up things. You want to make sure that you keep certain hard edges at certain places to express the anatomy of the face. So to do it like a before and after. So I'm bringing back the anatomy right now, because what I'm doing is, let's say I'm painting a patch, which is like, all right, so there's like a forehead here. And even just that can work. And then I'm going to use the saffron brush to just soften up the places. And it's what's going to do is going to bring me some anatomy to it. Then I can do another patch here and then softening it up a little bit. Now, if you're a total beginner, I can understand that this is like, it requires knowing anatomy, it requires knowing the plane of the head. So don't be too hard on yourself here. There's a lot to learn ahead, but that's still the way you would have to fix this. To just make sure that you understand where the change of values are occurring, and then soften those areas in between. Just making sure that you have like more defined edges. for the different part. Like I'm doing right now, I'm doing the eyelid. So it needs to be defined. Same thing with the nose. Like every edges that you see that are a little bit like, because you can stylize a portrait. That's not a problem. But if it's very messy like this, then you're losing all the anatomy, and then it's really hard to distinguish what's the facial features of that person, right? So I could take my time here and do a lot more, but I think I expressed my point really well. Just take your time more when it comes to blending things. But this was, an exercise to help you understand the tools more than it was for anatomy. So like I said, don't be too hard on yourself. I just thought I would give you an example here. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you for sharing your work, Felipe. Let's go to the next one, which I don't remember who else is. Rico. All right, Rico. So you said that you feel comfortable blending colors, but as soon as you add details, they get lost, and you get back to coloring the colors because you lose your details. All right, so Rico, today I will try to give you a little bit more of a workflow to help you with that. So first, thank you for sharing your work with me. You give me this and this. I'm not going to cover this. I think you did a great job here. This is your 20 minutes. This is your 15, and this is your 10. And look at the 10 and 20. It's crazy that half the time you did like really, really great job. So kudos with that. I'm going to try to just give you more here on this one and try to simplify it as much as possible with steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to just erase one of them. Wait, I don't want to erase it totally. I just want to cover it with some white. And then I'll do something on top of that. Okay, cool. So when it comes to painting colors, rendering colors, and then adding details, what you want to do is make sure that you do it on with steps. So the first thing I want to do is obviously doing like the form of the orange, no matter what's the form of it. I'll take that for now. There's many ways to approach this, right? There's ways that you're going to do like very detailed sketching. Well, where I would put like the little green thing here. I don't know how you call that. Little green thing here, and then, just put details on it. Or what you can do is, and it's a technique that it's not really covered at this point in the academy, but it's coming. What you want to do is start directing color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just basically fill that up like this. And that's going to be my orange. And I'm going to use a lock pixel here on the layer to make sure that whatever I do now, it's inside it. And so the first step is going to be this, to make sure that you have that. Usually what you want to do is start with a mid-tone value, right? So right now what I have is not a mid-tone really. A mid-tone is something between the light and the shadow. So if I look at this orange, for example, if I could, as this orange, there's a lot of colors and a lot of values, right? And the darkest that you have is about this. And the more pale that you have is around these ones. And then you got something in the middle, which, I think that could be considered metal. I think that's the mid ground in between the two. And you see there's a variation in value, meaning that it goes from bright to dark. And there's a variation in hues as well, because it goes from something yellowish or orange-ish to something a little bit more red. So there's like a change of value as well here. And if you look at my color wheel here, so it goes from here, and if I do that, it goes straight there. So there's like that much of a play here. So what I want to do is start with a mid value. So right now it's not a mid value, so I'm going to change that to the mid value. Now that's the mid value. And then what you want to do is render the form first with form shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the darkest color, and I'm going to check my orange here. And there's a lot of light. There's two light source on this one. There's one from the top, and there's one from the side. So I'm going to try to, whoops, I'm going to try to, you know what, I'm going to do, all right. I'm going to try to first establish the volume of it by adding some shadows like this. There's also like a little patch of shadow right here. So I could add it there like that. And then just maybe modify that a little bit. Modify that a little bit. That seems too big. So take your time here. Zooming out, looking at what you're doing. All right, so that's about it. So you did a great job already at that, so that's cool. Then what you want to make sure is to add the different hues and the light. So it goes from this to kind of a orange yellow-ish. I think that could be a good color. I'll create, whoops. How did I put it there? All right. So that's fine. So now I'm going to just add that yellowish, trying to add a little bit more hues. And then there's also some paler yellow that come here. So I'm going to add that paler yellow as well, just right here. There's also that pin of green, right? So now on top of that, like this is like the basic, like, and on top of that, what you want to do is starting to add details. So in theory, like this is done. The only thing we're missing is the shadow under it. And so from there, what I'm going to do is adding some details. So I'm creating a new layer, obviously taking my time here. And then you can pick a grain. You can either pick it from the source, or you can try, like I'm doing here, to pick a grain. That seems fine. I'm going to start with the darkest color. I'm going to add the light on top of it. So it seems to be some kind of a, like you did it, some kind of a triangle, star kind of thing, like this. And I'm not going to go hyper precisely, but just close enough. And then what I can do is just adding the light on top of it. So that's one thing, right? And then from there, that's where you're going to start to add those little crevasses. Now, the way I would approach this is you can imagine that those crevasses are like some smaller triangles that comes from dark. So if you look at this one, for example, it goes like some sort of a triangle like this, right? It goes like that, and it kind of finishes around here, right? But what it does really, it's a gradient. It's a gradient that goes from dark, like my orange, and then it goes way up like this, like that this way, to pale. So you want to basically establish like the smaller forms here. So what I could do is simply start with some dark color here and use the smudge tool here to just kind of smudge that, which will give me like a natural, I'm going to take that out for a second, natural gradient sort of. And then you can use the hard edge brush again, and there's like that kind of that white-ish on top of it here. I'll add that back. That kind of goes into like this, right? So now what I'm doing is, before I'm adding like all the small details everywhere, I want to establish the smaller form. So I did the big form. I did that detail here because I needed it for placement. And now what I'm doing is I'm establishing that kind of a form here. And so I want to, that's perfect. I want to soften that up a little bit. And there's like the minutia here of making sure that everything fits, right? So from there, it's about, all right, taking some hues, painting them, merging them, using also the mixer brush tool to just kind of mix them together. This line is a bit too sharp, so I could use also like, I feel like the colors could be just a little bit more dark-ish around here. And so you want to design that shape to the best of your capacities. But really what I'm trying to do is just establishing that round form here. And then you have the same thing everywhere, right? So I did just one to give you an example. So I'm not going to do it all of it, but that's the way I would establish it, right? So you do one piece here, and then you want basically to it's step and repeat. Basically, it's like, all right. So there is like another shape. It's going to be here. So from there to there, from there to there, and from there to there, and from there to there, and etc. etc. Wait. So yeah, well, you're welcome, Rico. Sorry, I was reading the chat. I can really not do two things at the same time. So that's the way I would do it. So before I do any details, I would start to establish like the round form and do it with the soft round brush at this point, because it's just a good way to learn. And then the mixer, the smudge tool is perfect for that kind of work, because you can just smudge the lines that you did. And yeah, have them like at the right places and everything. And then you want to render all of that in the right way. Once it's rendered, then comes the time to do details. Now, if you want to go photorealistic, what you would do is, what I consider boring basically, is you would just really look at this, and there's like basically some white everywhere. And what you would do is to paint each part of the white. But if you understand lighting, you can just go with your imagination here and just start adding random marks, and then use those random marks. I'm going to use a brush here with, it's a skin texture brush, it's Freckles, that are going to add some interest. Is that this one? Is that this one? Yeah. Not really. Sorry, I'm going to find the right one. I think it's this one. Just going to put it smaller. Yeah. Like I'm going to use this brush here. And what I'm going to do is on a new layer, I'm going to paint some detail here all around it. All right. With that color. So that's like that color going in this color. I'm going to use a saffron brush. Where is it? Here. To just delete a little bit here when it goes in the color. I don't want it to be so apparent. And then what you want to do is think about the light direction. Now, if you look at your illustration, if you look really closely, you can see that, and that's what I'm going to try to show you. You can see that every dot, let's say that's a one of those dark dot here. Every dot has light. No, I'm going to do it on the orange. Every dot has light that hits here and the shadow over there. And so if you do this on each of the points here, you're going to actually mimic the light direction. So you can imagine that, I'm going to actually do it on this. Yeah. So you can imagine that there's a bit here, there's a bit there, there's a bit there. And you don't have to go for each of them. I'm going to use something less again here. You don't have to do it for each of them, but that's what's going to kind of bring that details and 3D effects that you're looking for, basically. And there's a lot more technique. That's just to show you one of them. But the way I would do it, because I'm not a huge fan of doing details like this, I kind of like to use just brushes and let brushes do the work. And I think you did a great job at it already. I think it's a bit too rough to my own taste. I would just try to like, I'm going to keep the details I already have, but the way I would add details, I would take a brush with some details, some texture, and I would just play with the transparency a lot more. I'm going to just create a mask on it so I can do like this. I would just probably paint just a few details like that randomly probably use it with like multiply, and then put back the opacity down until it becomes just a random kind of texture. And I would stack up layers upon layers of different kind of texture. I'm going to delete a little bit here. I push it a little bit more here. I'll delete it just a little bit in the light, so I can keep it just in the shadows. And also that's one texture that I would add, and then I would create a new layer. And this new layer, what I would do is find another texture. Whoopsie, that's not the texture I want. Another texture, let's say this one here. And I would push the light, so there's like some light here, right? So I would just paint kind of the light here, and there's a bit more here, and just kind of push there. And there's another patch around here, and I'm putting it on separate layers always to make sure I can come back with the saffron brush and kind of erase it. And then I could lock the pixels, so making sure that I paint only on this layer that I created. And I could go manually and push some of them to make sure that they're like a little bit closer to the white. So I could put just a little bit more visual interest at some places, like some spots here that could just be a little bit more pushed. And so that's how I would approach it, really by steps, so that you can, like if I were to take them all out and just build the orange, it goes basic rendering, then you go with the basic rendering, but of the smaller parts. So in this case, like the folds in the orange, like this. And then I would add stack layers of like small texture and everything, and just push those texture with the idea of the light direction that goes into it. So yeah, I think I answered your question. I see you're in the chat, so perfect. I'm glad this is helping everybody. I'm gonna make sure that we have more videos like this in the Academy really soon. But in the meantime, I'm glad that you guys see that as being useful. So thanks for sharing, Rico. Let's go to the next person that share a work today, and that's Felix. Felix, I'm looking so forward to work on your piece, because I keep seeing building week after week, and it's really fun. So thanks for sharing. I really appreciate it. So I've touched on the picture. It was 2 months ago, and you're asking me if I see stuff. Well, everything can always be like pushed, right? But I think you did a great job. It's a very nice piece. Now it's full of emotion. There's some light direction. There's some action. There's some wind. The character is cute. I like the color schemes. There's definitely a few things, and I started to work already on it, so I'm looking forward to show you. There's a few things I want to push here. There's a few things that bothers me. So I'm going to start with one thing that bothers me, and it's that that logo here. If you look at the contrast of the image, very small, that logo is so apparent that it's fighting with the attention of the face. So right now, I feel like those two are fighting together, and it should not. That's not important as much as the face or the action that's happening here. So that's one thing I would like to do from the start, is put it just less apparent. I'm just going to paint over it with the color of the cape. And already that, and maybe that's too much. I could maybe take out a little bit less. Already that, they're a little bit more equal. So it's less of a problem, I think. And also it's very sharp. So maybe even, I don't know, kind of blurring it a little bit, the edges could help. Like imagine that there's movement, and even blurring the edges of the cape could also help, like establishing some movement. Like I'm going just too much here, but it's to give you an example. So that's one thing. Same thing with the scarf here. There's some movement in that scarf, and that's going to bring some softer edges So having those softer edges can absolutely help reading the whole illustration. So that's one thing I'm seeing. So there's definitely a thing with edges, I think, all around that can be done. One thing that I think that you could do that pushes is add some background. And that's what I started to work on that I want to show you. Because when I look at this image without the background here, when I look at this image, I can imagine that behind her, there's like a very dark valley of some sort that you can't really see, but that is part of the environment. So that's what I'm trying to establish. So I'm going to give you just a before and after because I didn't paint it totally. I just started to put it, but I'm going to put it just together. And so that's the effect. Like it's very just, you see that there's some perspective, you see that there's some background, but you don't want to go into too much details. And that's where I was in the process before I started the live. So I can maybe push it a little bit more here. So you can imagine that maybe there's like clouds in the sky and there's like places that, that let pass a little bit more light. So you get patches of, of light, some places. There would be some work and some time to take here. So I don't want to push it too much, but there would be some, whoops, that's too contrasty, I think. There would be some contrast to be added a little bit at some places, and just play with the values to make sure that that all of this makes sense. But I think it's already showing a little bit what I was trying to establish, which is having just a little bit more of environment. So that's a very, very easy one I think you can add. And there's like that white patch. Like I think you could add some cloud. Like if I were to push this maybe a little bit more into like a ray of light that comes in between clouds, that could be really interesting. Wait, let me try that slowly. Maybe I'll take another brush than this. Maybe that. So just something that like there's like some clouds that just comes in that direction, And wait. Yeah, definitely environment. I read your your comments, Felix, in the chat. And yeah, environments are really hard, but they don't need to be like crazy. Like what I did here was maybe I should have showed that before I started the details. What I did here is actually I put a picture. That's a picture that I put, and then I put lighten on it and put some transparency on it, and then I painted on it. So I just slap a texture basically. To basically do it, and then I painted a little bit on it, and you see that took me a second. Sometimes just use what concept artists are using every day, which is like texture. Just take a picture, put it there, slap it there, and see with the values that are already there what you can do with it. So that's one thing. Now I'm not going to push too much the clouds here because that could take me forever, which I don't want that. But I'm trying to just establish a little bit more contrast here, a little bit more direction as well. So that could be one thing, playing with like the direction of the clouds here, having some fun, pushing them could be one thing. Already that I think gives a little bit more of, we don't see the details, but we can imagine there's some things, and just that imagination is great. I think if you were to have like something very blurry like that, like I did here, the one thing that you would need at this point would be to have some very crisp details. Very crisp detail in the foreground. Like it could be like you had like that little thing here, so it could be just a few more of those that you just adding here and there. You can add a few more, like if they were like closer or whatever. That's another thing I don't want to spend too much time on, because I want to talk about the owl, because that's the other thing. But yeah, having a little bit more details here could definitely help. Those are terrible. Don't do those. here. But yeah, just having more details. Maybe it's just more grass. I don't know. I would have to experiment and just like do some trial and error here at this point. Maybe it's more grass, but just having more details. Like you have already some details here. Maybe just pushing those, making sure that we feel like there's light here and there's shadows and all those details. So this way, that's not going to look wrong. If you're just adding those details, it's going to feel like, all right, the foreground is crisp and the background is more blurry. Okay, cool. So the owl. That's the other thing. I had a few pictures, and I think what I'm going to do here at this point is to create a new document like this, so I can have my pictures of owls on one side, and yeah. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to place all this. So your owl right now. Okay, well, yeah. The other thing I think that's you could be pushed a little bit in terms of composition is the movement. There's a natural movement on that whole composition that I absolutely love, and the movement is going kind of this way. You see, you have the cape that goes this way. You have the clouds now that goes this way. But I know it's pretty much me. But I think even when you open this one, there's already some movement, right? So I just added some movement. There's the owl that goes this way as well. But I feel like it could be just pushed a little bit more with the owl. So I was looking for pictures that show me movement. And I think at this point, maybe it would be too much work for you. But I'm still going to give it a try. I'm going to try to just take the owl. All right. I'm going to make a copy of it. So that's a copy of it. And I'm going to warp it. I'm going to warp it and see if I can just bring more movement into the wings and into the whole kind of shape of the owl itself. Something like that. From there to there. There to there. To just help me. And obviously that now the head would need to be just probably modify a little bit like this one. So maybe I'm going to use like this as this. Also the wing, that's what I was trying to look at. The wing itself, it's missing some values to understand what's happening. There's definitely some light coming here, right? There's light coming down here and it's going to hit her. We already talked about this. And I think right now it's missing on the wing some light, because that's what I realized, that you got a wing like right here. And maybe you could have something a little bit more clearer. Like I feel like these wings would be better, I think. So maybe we'll use that. So maybe we'll use that. So I'm going to just delete that, create a new layer, and just try here to. I'm obviously going to paint over your details, and I'm sorry in advance for that. But you can also imagine that one wing would be like something like that. And then the other one would be paler, obviously, because there's more light that's going to come into it. And, it's lower than that, actually. It's, I would say something like that. Different angle. Sorry for that. I'm going to put that to, there you go. So yeah, that. So that could be like the two wings. I feel like this is going to be just clearer that you got two wings here. Now, this is a suggestion. You don't have to do this, but I feel it could help. And then you will have to re-render the whole bird based on that. So I'm just going to establish like kind of the basics here. basics values, you would have like some light that would hit the head here. Would definitely have like, maybe that wing could be just a bit darker, but then you would have some transparency in this. You would definitely have some transparency in the wings. Like you can see like the wings here that have like some lights that comes through them. I might just change that to give it even more light and shape like that. All right, I don't want to lose myself in details. I think I'm expressing the points quite well, but I feel like this has more movement. Okay. So yeah, so I think that's where I want. Let me give you a before and after. I'm going to put that all together and mask all of this. Bear with me. There you go. So what do we have here is before and after, and before and after. And so, yeah, I think that's where you are. From there, I think it's still missing. I think it's still missing. You know, I'm going to try to push it just a little bit more. It's still missing the harsh lights that's going to give like the contrast. Right now, like if I put it small, it's hard to read the difference between the bird and the character. We would need some more contrast, and I think that can be definitely maybe added, and that's where you will need like some more time to just establish that. But to be able, I think, to establish, and I'm just going to go very broadly here because I think that's what's needed here, just a little bit more of that kind of light direction. Put that to opacity down, and then I'll just delete what's on the bird and on the character. What I'm trying to do here is just having some light direction in the sky to bring some contrast in between the characters, and using that light direction as an element of design to bring the eyes of the viewer within the illustration. So let me finish that real quick. And then you would have her. Let's see how that looks. So probably that if I were to do this, I would still need to establish some very, very bright light here to establish her hair. And that's a tangent light right here. That's not good. I'm not going to fix it now, but she would probably have to fix it either by making the hair go beyond the face of the owl. And so I'm not going to fix it, but I'm fixing it. Just making sure that they are on top of each other a little bit more. Whoops. So that probably would have some more white. You would need some more contrast here, there, and there. So if you put it small, then all right, it reads better already. You would need just all those places where the light hits. I feel like we can just push the values a little bit more to make sure that, and that's what I'm trying to do here, to make sure that that we understand the image. Okay. Something like that. Even the scarf here, the value needs to be pushed a little bit more because it comes in the light. This needs to be pushed a lot more. All those places that where the light hit, because your center of interest is here. So I would definitely try to push all the small details like in there. You don't have to do that everywhere, but just in there. So you have more details to look at the right places. It's going to attract, it's going to attract the eye of the viewer. So once again, Let's put all that together. And what we have is before, I'll zoom in just a little bit, before and after, and before and after. And so that's it. Thanks for sharing. Beautiful illustration. I'm looking so forward for you to finish it. So keep on sharing it. I love it. So all right, let's move on to the next person that's here today. And that's Aman. Thanks for sharing your work with me, Aman. You say that you're total newbie. This is your first portrait. You want some critiques. You use Liquify. No shame in that. I use Liquify all the time. Having much contrast. All right, so I'm going to try to push the illustration and help you and give you some tricks right here. You're welcome, Felix. Absolutely welcome. Everybody that's here, thank you so much for being with me and sharing your work. I love to work on your work. So yeah, you're absolutely welcome. So Aman, first of all, I want to say congratulations. As a first portrait, this is amazing. Very rarely people will understand how to place the value as well as you did. You did a great job. So I'm going to be extra harsh on you because I think you can take it. There's few details. It's just tiny details that makes the anatomy a little bit wrong, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not a pro. I'm not like a master when it comes to an anatomy. It's one thing that's really hard, I think, to grasp for anybody. But still, I feel like when it's not your art, you can see it more. So I'm going to just push things that I see. So first of all, there's the hair that I can see that if you look at the size of the hair, this one is a bit larger, and it's very tiny a difference, but it's that tiny difference that kind of push us away. I'm gonna try to just bring that. Oops, that's the wrong angle. Try to just check out what's that needed. I think that's closer already. So that's one thing that I was seeing. The other thing, I feel like the nose is just a tiny bit, like the whole face is just a tiny bit longer. And those are like tiny details, right? But I'm trying to see how can I fix it, because it's either the nose is just too thin or it's not long enough. Maybe it's a bit of both. But at this point, everything is so close that I'm not going to try to mess it up. What I'm going to show you is more how to push a few things. So on this portrait, what you have is a few highlights that hits on a few planes of the head. What do I mean by that? Here, you got a highlight that's hit it. Here, you got one. I'm going to push it even more. Here, you have one. You have one on top of the eyelid here. You have that little shape here for the lip, and that little shape. And those are the parts. You also have like this one here. Those are the parts you want to push on a portrait when you're doing a portrait. So I'm going to do this. First of all, I'm going to just try to blend this a little bit more here, because that's definitely one line. You were right to put it there, but I feel like it's going to be better if it's just a bit more softened. So I'm just going to try to bring that like this. Yeah, just a little bit more like this. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to try to establish those angles. So you already did a great job here, I think. I'm going to push it just a little bit more. What you want to keep is those hard edges, and that's one thing that the new portrait 1 week portrait class, which should come really soon, is going to talk about. I'm going to try to push the edges of those planes that gets more light, like this part here gets a little bit more light. There's also, like, I was pushing this one here a little bit more. This one could be just that highlight. Then there's Just this could be just pushed a little bit more so we can see a little bit more. The idea is to push the planes of the face that give that portrait the expression. I'm gonna do that like this a little bit more. The eyes is not quite at the right places. I'm not gonna touch it right now. I'm gonna push that first. So I'm scanning with my eye, trying to see like what are the hard shape I can push. So I'm just gonna try to do this a little bit more. And that's a very work of paying attention to things. You just want to take your time here and try to establish those shapes slowly. All right, something like that. Trying to see at the same time what's making his face, because on your portrait it feels like his face is just a little bit more frowning than on the original. I'm trying to see what's the reason for that. Maybe it's because of that little part here. I think the lips itself. Maybe I can just put that as inside. I'm going to just put that together. And I'm going to shove it up in Liquify for a second. So as you can see, I use Liquify for everything all the time. It's just a great tool, like no shame in using it. And I just want to make sure that he's not frowning so much. I'm going to bring back the lips a little bit more volumed, like that. And bring this one down. Kind of. Just a little bit. Is that better? A little bit. All right, so those are the things that are really important to push. As you can see, I'm adding some structure to the whole face, because details will go on top of this, right? But what is important is to make sure that we don't lose the structure, because if you lose the structure, then the whole thing is going to look round and blurry. So I'm really scanning here, like the tip of the nose could definitely, you know what, I'm going to put them side by side because I keep zooming in out. I'm just going to create a new document. And I'll be able to zoom in like this without losing the details. The nose needs just, there's, I don't know if it's the shape or definitely like needs more of an angle here. Like I'm going to push that angle a little bit more, just to understand that angle a little bit more. Let's see what we have right now from there to there. So definitely a little bit more structure. What else can be pushed? What else? Maybe I can just try to see if, yeah, maybe that's one of them. I feel like maybe that's one of them. That's why he's looking like he's frowning too much. I feel like that should be higher a little bit. Yeah. Although it shouldn't be that that pale. It definitely should be higher though. So just gonna try to push that a little bit. What else? Obviously, this is the place in the illustration where you want to take your time. So I'm sorry if that seems long. I'm going to get to the details in a second. I just want to establish a little bit more of the structure before I go into it. You did such a great job that it's really hard for me to actually like see the places I can make better. So that's a compliment for you. I really think you did a great job. Next. Few things like the planes of the nose, under the nose here, like that could be just a little bit pushed a little bit harder in terms of value to add some contrast. So we're adding some more structure. There's the eye here that it's not looking exactly at the right place here. To what I'm looking at, the shapes are really close. but it's, yeah, it needs to just be like, I'm gonna take the iris here. I'm gonna make a copy, and I'm just gonna put it here in the corner. I think that's what the problem is, and I'm just gonna paint this here, and see that corner here, that needs to be a lot darker, and that's gonna bring the eye at the right place. All right, so from there to there. What else? A few details. Now I'm getting a little bit more into the details. I fixed the places where the light needed to be fixed, and now I can take my time and see. All right, so there's a lot more contrast that needs to be done on that top eyelid. It's the kind of things that I have a lot of difficulties because I don't have a steady end. You know, there's different skills for different artists. Some people have super crazy steady hands. I am not those kind of artist at all. My hand is not steady. So when it comes to small details, I tend to enrage myself. But I think I did pretty good here. So a little bit more detailing like that's going to bring just a little bit more of focus on the eyes. And the eyes are important on a portrait, right? So I'm going to boost also contrast here. So it's about observing the values, right? And making sure that the values are dark enough, like your eyelashes here, for example, which are kind of too big. Like, whoops, that's too much. That's there, and there's like that highlight. There's a bit of a highlight there. It's kind of having like that fold here. And I feel like maybe it's just should be larger, tiny bit. So from there to there. And so from there, now you can decide of what do you want to, wait a minute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So now I'm about to add some freckles. Was reading the chat. Thanks, Chris, for the comments. So yeah, now at this point, because I reestablished a little bit I'm not going to do the clothing. The clothing, I think you did a great job. Really, it's nice. I like that you add even more contrast than the original. Here, I can bring back this. You add even more contrast than the original. I might, whoops, not that. Wait, why do you do this? I'm just going to crop that for a second. Don't need the rest. I think you did a great job. The values are a little bit darker, but that's fine. You have it well-rounded, and so I like it. So I established just a little bit more, and then you can decide what you want to blur, basically, before we add the details. So what I would do is on a new layer with the mixer brush tool, and the smudge tool, you want to just basically just round up a little bit, and even the soft round brush, you want to just paint them. What I'm trying to do is to keep that shape without having to have a shape that is so hard, because right now it's really hard. So I'm just trying to make it disappear a little bit, but I want to be able to still feel it, you know, like it's going to be gone. It's going to be softer, but I still want to be able to feel it, like it's there. So I'm just going to basically just blur a little bit the transitions in between the two. But I still want to be able to feel that they are harder shapes. Here, there was another one I wanted to push. It was this one right there. So with that been done, I just added just a little bit more of the anatomy. I hope you can see, because it's very like I said, you did such a great job. That's really like small details, but you can see that it's rounding up the place of the planes of the face that needed to be rounded. And so now you can go and add some details and have some fun, because you have a structure now that you can just literally, you cannot go wrong. And then it's like you did a pretty good job, I think, already. I think what you needed to do is just to push them to have more fun with it. So here I'm adding literally like a layer on top of everything. And what I do is I usually paint over the whole face like this. And then I take a saffron brush. By the way, this is a brush that I'm using that you can have in the Academy. It's in the skin texture brushes. And then you can just, you go with the saffron brush. I'm obviously erasing what's on the highlights, what's on the eyes, what's like at places that just looks weird. I'm just keeping most of what I like. And I keep an eye also on the portrait to make sure that I get closer. And then there's a part at some point that I'm going to delete those two. I think they're too much. There's a part after that, like, well, you know what? I can still add one more of like random, but at some point you're going to have to just do some one by one design and just look at the illustration or the photography, I mean, and just see like, all right, so what can I push to have something even more realistic? So right now I'm going to delete a bit part of those. And then it's, all right, so I'm going to take like I'm going to take a saffron brush to just kind of pass on top of those ones here. And then I can take a hard edge brush to decide like, all right, so I want one that's a bit prominent here, a little bit darker. And then maybe another one here. And then you can get inspired from the portrait. Maybe there's a one here, and maybe this one here is a bit darker. And so on and so forth. At this point, you understand the gist of it. And then you can take all of those together, merge them, and still have like, you know, like some cleanup. Like the chin here didn't have much. Here it was pretty pale. Here too, maybe there's not so many. I could add some more there, and I won't, but that's supposed to be a little bit more pale, and those are maybe too big, and so on and so forth. I just go over it, and I'm like, all right, what can I take out? And that's how I would add freckles to it. There's a few more details now because it's a portrait that you can add, such as eyelashes. I'm going to go back to having them side by side here. Where did I paint? That's the one I paint. Okay, switch. Zoop, zoop. So eyelashes. You see there's reflections on the eyelashes, which are kind of white-ish. So you can just push that. Try to, on a new layer, just try to have some more eyelashes. Wait. Did I delete? I feel like I lost some contrast here. Did I not put that already? I'm going to push the contrast here because for the eyes, I need first to have the contrast. I feel like I must have deleted a layer while I was doing all this. I feel like the eye, I already did that. The eye was supposed to be darker and everything. So let's imagine that correction that I already did already there, but I'm going to put just a little bit more contrast here. And then, yeah, you want to basically just add those smaller details like eyelashes that, in this case, are kind of white-ish on top of it, like that. Let's take a saffron brush to erase a few, and even maybe the smudge tool just to make them a little bit more blurry so they don't have to be so prominent. And so that's the idea. This way you're able to just add a little bit more detail. So I'm going to give you just a before and after. Back, back, back. And you can see that the only thing that I actually modified was the haircut a little bit. It was just too big. But beside the rest, I think your anatomy was really, really close. So you did a great job out of it. So if that was your first painting, bravo. It's beautiful. And thanks for sharing. So next we have next and last. Let's see if there's someone that showed up in between. Nope. Next and last we have Maya. Maya, thanks for sharing. You said that you made a rock study, but you have difficulty and struggle doing simplifying the complex shape and value and structure. So all right, so let's work on that. So that's your rock. I'm gonna create a second document as well, so we can have them side by side. All right. Okay. So that's your illustration. And what you have in the background was other studies that I'll come afterwards. I think if you looked at the example that I give with the orange, it's kind of the same thing that you want to do, right? What you want to do is imagine, I'm going to do it on this one here. What you want to do is imagine the form as its simplest. I'm going to take just one value here. And so imagine that. So that's one side of it. And then you have like kind of another kind of side of it here, which I'm just gonna, whoops. Maybe you have like a little bit of a hold here. And then, well, we have to this part here, what could actually make darker. That's another hold here. Then I'm going to create one for this here. That could be all together. And then this one, just tiny bit darker. So you want to establish first, I'm going to put that in grayscale, so it's going to make more sense. You want to kind of establish this, right? So it's like, and I should have go with harder shape, I think it would have been clearer. But a rock, what it has, it's lots of different planes before there's details to it. So you can imagine here, let's say that's another plane here that turns there. Maybe there's some other kind of transition in between those two here. And then this one turns back into kind of the shadow here. I'm going to clean up the edges a little bit here. Let's clean up the edges. And so all those planes are turning away from each other. And that's the color that we'll get is based on how abrupt they will turn from the light source. Like I feel like this could be just a little bit more pale, actually. Maybe a tiny bit more dark. So what I'm trying to establish here is to show you just a simplified way to visualize this rock, right? And I'm sure you already did that because it kind of looks like you did already. That's not working. It's too dark, actually. Just but that's a little bit more pale. Something like that. So that's just an example, right? Once you place that in, then you can start adding some details. Now, I don't know the color that I've been using here. They're pretty cool. Then you can add some details. So you already add a lot of texture here, and that's great. I think, and you know what? Now I'm going to switch those two so I can continue working on this one. So now what I think that you should do is just get back to the original and because there's a lot of small texture, and what you want to do before you do the small texture, like I did for the orange, you want to establish the smaller craters. So there's a few places on this rock where the light kind of changes. So like here, there's like that kind of a hole right here. Changes into the rock here. So you can create something here, and it would probably just have some sort of a changes in transition of the light here that gets cut up a little bit more here. And you want to place those first. There's a few on top of it, so you could just have some more fun. Maybe you can even place something here and kind of establish that there's like a crack in between those two. And you can really design that like as much as you want. There's that, and on top of that, you have like, it's a really complex rock that you have there. On top of that, you have like those patches that have like different colors into it, and it's very like multicolor, that rock, really. So it's not the easiest. I think you already did a great job, like what you did here. I think it's already great. I think what's missing really, it's just some structure, bringing back the structure. So maybe doing that already is going to bring some structure. Maybe you can do without having to do the smaller craters, because it's kind of a messy structure. So maybe from there, what you want to do is just have a texture that you really like. I'm going to try to find something here that works. Maybe that. Yeah, that works. Maybe you want to have that, and then what you want to do is to just add some structure, some texture on each of them. Just make sure that you kind of treat them at the beginning with their for each plane. So like I'm going to delete whatever it's not on that plane here. Right. And then here, same thing. Kind of adding some texture there, maybe a little bit darker at some places. And it becomes like, as long as you're following the steps, it becomes a lot of experimentation. And then it's like, all right, so I have a few different textures, like let's say like, oops, that stops in kind of a shadow, kind of a shadow here. And then maybe there's a bit of light here, maybe there's a bit of dark here. And then you just play with the texture, and you see a little bit also of creating some happy mistakes, right? So you're like, all right, I feel like that's darker. And then you can also just think about the transition in between, having them more or less apparent. Like this is very sharp, but maybe it's not as sharp here. And then just maybe the form is kind of merging together. It's all about, I would say, the transition in between each of the planes, how you're going to design them. Add some hard edges at some places, and then maybe there's like, all right, there's a hole here, and then in this hole, then I'm going to establish the light that comes obviously in the hole. It's going to be darker. It's darker in the hole, but maybe it's a little bit more pale on this side here because it catches the light. And then we have like on the side. And so you go from basically designing. There's actually a tutorial on the Academy about rocks, right? And it's pretty much how I approached this, is to I put the basic structure, and then you want to design just a few different sorry, cannot do two things at the same time. To be able to do basically some small design, some small imperfection in the rock. You want to do that after you establish the whole rock. And so yeah, from there I could just have a lot more time and just design everything here, and even push this here. Like it feels like there's like a hole here. Maybe that's coming like that, and then that transition here is maybe just not so sharp. Same thing for that. Just merging a little bit the lines together, making sure it's not too abrupt, and maybe the value change, the color change here is just too broad. So maybe I can bring it back by painting a little bit on top of it, and just like that, you just basically trying to design slowly. So that's how I would approach that. Now, that being said, I'm not going to finish the whole thing. That being said, I think you did a great job. I think it's missing that structure a little bit. Like you lost it. Like you have some structure here, like very good structure here. And I can see like there's planes. But then when it comes to the details, they become just a bit too messy. Like just taking more of your time, I think, to bring back some edges that are clearer will just establish a little bit more. So like it's as easy as having just a clearer edge here, for example. Then, all right, so that's that. If it's that pale here, it means that you're going to have probably a shadow. It means that that's like on top of something. It's just making sure that the values make sense, basically, because if you put something very pale there, then it means that it's catching the light, which means that behind it is going to be shadow, right? Just like that. And then being just careful that if you put like a patch of color like this, it needs to be justified. Right now, it kind of seems two different colors. So yeah, so just that, taking your time to reestablish form and design one step at a time. So I really hope this is helping. Here, I think you did a great job with the tree, actually. See, because we can still see the shape of the tree is established a lot better. I think here you could have pushed the limit of the texture, though, by just adding some more detail. There's I see almost like lines in this tree. So you could have just add, and I'm going to try to make it so it makes sense. I'm going to add a multiply layer here. Something like yellowish, I guess. Maybe more. Trying to get the big color. Yeah, that could be good. Like I feel like there's like just kind of lines that kind of goes a little bit like that. And adding that, you'll see like I'm going to delete them a little bit in a moment so they're not so apparent. But adding just that is also going to establish a lot more volume. Like you already did like a great job, I think, with like just rendering the three kind of parts of that tree. But adding some cross contour line like this, which will be part of the texture. I'm going to just go faster here. Will also be part of the texture of the tree at this point. And then you can take just a soft round brush and probably delete a little bit what's in the light to keep only the shadows. And then you can go and have some fun to add some specular, some occlusion shadows with those lines and be like, all right, so that goes, oops, I mean, I'm still on the multiply, that's why. So lighting, where's the light direction on this illustration? Well, we are in the shadow, so there's not light direction really in here. So you can just then imagine that push a little bit more some shadows at some places, like having some fun of like if it would be like cracks basically in the tree. And yeah, that's where I would try to have some more fun because there's a lot of that's the mistake, and you didn't do that mistake, but I just want to point it out. The mistake is you look at that tree, there's so much texture. I could go like with a texture brush, like this one, for example, and be like, all right, there's texture everywhere. Let's put texture everywhere. And you would lose the direction of the design, the intent of the design that you're trying to do with that tree. And so that's why, if you're asking yourself why you're putting lines on that tree, but that's what I'm trying to do or establish an example of is having intent of design something really precisely. So like this is one thing that I can see. There's like little lines here, so that's one thing I can start to design, add them like at the right places, and then you can take a little bit more of your time. I see like there's like almost like spider webs in the middle of like each of the trees like this, and so there you can just have a little bit of fun and try to maybe establish some kind of I don't know, some spider webs in between those trunks. Is that trunks? Can someone please write in the chat, how do you call the base of a tree? Is it base of a tree? Because in French we say tronc, so I keep saying trunks, but I think that's just not it. So yeah, some details like that, and that's why you don't want to go messy with those things. You need to be like what I'm doing right now, very precise, very adding it at the right places. Be like, all right, so like they're actually there. Those are the details that you can take your time afterwards to add to the tree. So yeah, I just added those two things. So yeah, I think that's where you are with this illustration. But it's great. I mean, it's a study, it's not an illustration, but yeah. Stump, thanks, Rico. So that's one. And the last one here is the light direction. I think that to help you with this one, you would have to push the light direction. So let me give you an example of that. So first of all, let's find the light direction. To find the light direction, you have to look if there's a cast shadow somewhere. And I was looking all over the tree, and it's really hard because the texture is not so big, but wait. Okay. Thanks for that correction, Rico. Well, if you know what it's called when it's not cut, let me know. Here, that's the cast shadow here. That's the cast shadow of this kind of monticle here. So the cast shadow is here. So then the direction of the light is kind of, I would say, something like this, right? Once you know that, then you can push it. And that's the idea, I think, that it's missing on this. Also, the values. Now, I could be critical. Like your tree, like your texture is already fun. It's just it's not super close of the original. One thing that I could try to do is maybe add a selective color, try to grab the green and see if it has any effect on it, but it doesn't really. Maybe if I take the blue in it or the yellow. Nah, not enough. Not enough for me to make a difference. You would have like to paint like, you know what? I'll just do it. I'm going to use a multiply and probably going to just like, I'm just going to paint real fast texture because it should be darker. So you get the picture. So that the texture should be darker here and maybe like a different color. That's too greenish. I would say it should be maybe a little bit more reddish, something like that. Maybe a little bit more pale, something like that. So that's just for the values, right? So you can get like the closer values. And then I think what's missing, like I was saying, is some light direction. So you want to push that light direction even more than what you see here, I guess. You already did it here, like you add like some shadow here, which is great. I think it's just, it needs to be more. So just trying to add a little bit more. of that here. Like you wanna try to design that in a way that it kind of makes sense, right? So maybe there's like this, for example, like designing like a little piece like that goes up. Let me see the shadow there. Just taking your time here. And this texture is very chaotic, so you really have to just simplify it at first, right? Make sure that you take decisions that are on purpose. Like I know I'm that kind of artist too. I just go with texture. I'm like, yeah, let's put texture. It's gonna look at something at some point, and it's great. Sometimes it works because that's how you get those happy mistakes that we keep talking about. And I'm that kind of artist. I'm like, I'm just gonna first, like, I'm basically lazy. I'm like, I'm gonna just try to first to have a mistake that I can work with faster than actually putting my head to actually take the time to design. And I think that's normal. We want to, we want to have results fast, and then we just jump to something that's faster to achieve. But I think in this case, you would just have to really reestablish that light shadow first to be able to, be able to just have something more clear. And then you could add some texture on top of it. So it's just tree base, huh? Okay, thanks, Rico. So the tree base. So yeah, I'm sure you understand what I'm doing here already. So just adding, I'm gonna put that together. Just reestablishing all the value first, and then establishing that light direction. Sorry, that light direction. And then what you can do, once again, I think you did that. Like, you see what I told you with the tree here, kind of the same. You did the mistake here. You went too hard here. See, like, that's kind of patchy. Where if you look at that, there's a clear direction on stripes. So you can use that. Like, you don't have to go, like, if you go like with a texture brush kind of randomly, at least try to have the direction. Like, I'm gonna just repaint on top of that a little bit here, and kind of, yeah, try to have at least the direction. So I would go like create a new layer. I would take that, and then I would go like, and go like, I'm go crazy a little bit, right? And then because I'm on a new layer, I can just take an eraser like this, and just, I'm going to delete most of it. And so that's super fast. That's one way to go fast and add texture, but at least I'm in the same sense of, same direction of that texture, right? And so once I did one part, kind of looks like it, I can create a new layer. I do the same thing, blah, 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 and then just kind of delete it a little bit, take another eraser that's harder, delete parts of it. And that's going to give me a texture that's closer. Let me put that together. A texture that's closer than what you did. Like, yes, there is changes in the color. And so I like what you did here, but it looks too patchy at this point. So just be focused on the direction of the texture and how they look like. The hues that you put in are really good. Like right now, I put everything white. That's not the best. What I like of what you did, and maybe what I can do is maybe have like a mix of the two. So I can just put that a little bit down and see a little bit of your texture in between. See, that would be perfect. So I have your texture, but just enough to give me some value change, some hue change, and then a texture that makes sense. And so that's how I would approach this. All right, I hope that was helpful. This was the last one for today, guys. thank you for everybody that shared their work. It's always a pleasure to work on it and to have a little chat with you in the chat. So thank you for everybody. I'll see you next month. Have a good day and happy painting.